Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse meeting. We've got a great topic, and we look forward to hearing our great speakers today. We have 3 speakers for you today, but before we get to that, we'd like to do our regular reports, and I believe Laura Slobach has joined us, and Laura has the minutes from the last meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning, Laura.
I am just sharing my screen for the minutes, and let me see if I can make them larger for you. Are you seeing those okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Oh,
Can you make them? There you go.
does that look okay?
Yes.
All right, so our last meeting was September 14th. We had a great presentation from Chevelle on addiction prevention. We had a call to order, approval of the minutes, treasurer's report update. And Chevelle talked to us about the impact of mental health in older adults. So I just took a few notes from her presentation and added her contact information if anybody would like to reach out to her. And then we had our committee updates. And that was it.
Great. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as written? Look like Ann.
I will second.
Second. John, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next, we have our treasurer's report. Our treasurer, Pam Palmer, is not able to join us today. So Autumn Cox is going to present her report for her. Take it away, Autumn.
You need to unmute Autumn.
Thank you. So you should be able to see the treasurer's report. It is posted on our website. If anyone has any questions about it, it's housed under the meeting tab. So at the beginning of July 1, we had a balance of $18,985 with a $3,000 reserve. Scrolling down, you can see. Thank you, Allison. Scrolling down, you can see what expenses we have, and then our balance as of today is $15,872.45.
Great. Can we get a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I so move.
Motion, second.
Great.
Third.
Thank you, guys. And thank you, Autumn, for doing that for us. I'm going to turn the program over now to Ann Elmore, and Ann's going to introduce our speakers for us. Ann?
Good morning, and on behalf of the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse, it's my pleasure to introduce today's topic, human trafficking. When it comes to the elderly and disabled, it isn't what you think, it's more prevalent too. What it is and what to do about it and who to help. Who can help are today's topic. Today's slides and links to articles on this subject are on the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse website for your viewing. A recording of this session also will be posted. Please place your questions in chat. They will be addressed at the end of the presentation. During the break after the presentation, please continue to put questions in chat so they may be answered. Today's speakers are Dr. Nancy Hagan, Coordinator of Training and Technical Assistance for the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission. She previously served as Senior Human Trafficking Analyst with Project No Rest. Gabby Bush, as a supervising investigator for Disability Rights North Carolina, Gabby leads a team of investigators who examine allegations of fraud and misapplication of funds by representative payees of Social Security benefits. She has experience and training in human trafficking, especially insofar as seniors and individuals with disabilities. Last but certainly not least is Heather Strickland, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Assistant special agent in charge for 3 working groups: crimes against disabled adults and elderly, task force and human exploitation and trafficking unit, and financial investigations unit. Her duties include assisting with overseeing the GBI's Adult Sex and Labor Trafficking Unit. Please join in welcoming them and their insights today.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone just seeing a black screen?
Yes.
That's always the way. We tested it before and it worked, and now it doesn't work.
Gabby, try sharing your screen one more time.
Okay, can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and it's
You're in
not letting me.
preview mode. You need to do
Yeah,
slideshow.
The present button is, let's see if it goes like this. It's not letting me click present like it did before. So I don't know if someone else is in the PowerPoint and that's why it's doing that. This is a cloud presentation.
Gabby, if you try clicking on the editing button, see if you can open it up in like a desktop view,
Okay,
and then you should be able to share that way. Or I'm sorry, present that way.
okay, perfect. Thank you. We did this right before we all got on and it worked no problem. Isn't that always the way? Okay, sorry about that, y'all. Okay, give me just another second. Okay. Aha. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes, very good.
Okay, perfect. All right, take it away, Nancy.
Okay, thank you so much. And Gabby, better you than me. I did a training a week ago for the Guardian Ad Litem program, and there were 300 people on. 3.5 minutes before we started, everything was good. We start, can't load the PowerPoint. So it always happens. You've kept your cool and I appreciate it. My name is Nancy Hagan and I am here with my colleagues to talk about 2 kinds of trafficking. Primarily, we're going to focus on benefits trafficking, but we also did want to mention the human trafficking of at-risk adults, which has occurred in the United States and informed some of both our federal and state legislation. I work with the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission, and we'll briefly present on the trafficking. And then again, the bulk of our presentation is going to be about benefits trafficking, which in North Carolina and under federal law is considered distinct from human trafficking, although you'll hear that we use the same language and there is ongoing discussion about the relationship between the two. So next slide, Gabby. Human trafficking is defined by federal law as an act, having an act, a means, and a purpose. It's the use of force, fraud, or coercion to manipulate another person into performing labor or sex acts for profit. And this is just kind of a general like PSA awareness around human trafficking, because I think as citizens and residents of this country, it's good for all of us to know. So the legislation is a bit different on the federal and state level regarding minors. Any commercial sex act with minors is legally considered trafficking. You notice labor isn't mentioned there, but minors cannot consent to engage in commercial sex. No such thing as a child prostitute. it's always considered human trafficking. It's always a felony. With labor, it's a little bit different, and we'll talk about that this morning. Next slide, Gabby. So this just depicts, again, the different kinds and forms of human trafficking that are recognized worldwide. We know that it's an international as well as a national, regional, and local phenomenon in crime. And there are international accords that share definitions of what human trafficking is. This slide depicts what those are. So most countries and most states consider any minor involved in commercial sexual activity. Like I just said, North Carolina is definitely one that considers sexual exploitation of children human trafficking. Any adult induced or into commercial sexual activity, again, you have to have one of those elements: force, fraud, or coercion. So there is a lot of discussion these days around sex worker rights and consensual sex work. You may have heard of phenomenons like seeking arrangements or some of the online platforms where adults theoretically can engage in commercial sex of their own volition. Gray area, again, casework is being developed around that, as is legislation. But for now, force, fraud, or coercion has to be in play where a person is compelled to engage into commercial sex activity against their own volition. So any minor or adult induced to perform labor or services through force, fraud, or coercion. So when it's labor and it's a minor, you have to show force, fraud, or coercion. If it's sex and a minor, you don't. That's distinct to the United States among many nations. And it becomes an issue when we talk about vulnerable children, youth, and adults, because it's very hard to prove that force, fraud, or coercion. Organ trafficking, we hear a lot about. We, to my knowledge, have never successfully investigated or prosecuted a case in the United States, but we do believe that it is a phenomenon that happens globally, where organs are harvested and sold for folks who are desperate for some kind of income generation. Next. Again, this is the really key piece. So there has to be a mechanism of control when we're talking about human trafficking. And the three, I always remember FFC, force, fraud, and coercion. Hollywood loves force. You may have seen some films like Taken, or you may, if you're on any kind of social media, there's a lot of mythology out there about what human trafficking is. Typically, that mythology depicts force. So abduction, stranger danger. Oftentimes, the so-called victim is depicted as typically a white girl who may be pubescent or prepubescent. Many people would consider her attractive, and she's taken or abducted, sequestered by someone and brought to another location, either locally or internationally, and then sold for sex. That is not the scenario that typically happens. What we'll spend time on this morning is talking about vulnerable folks. So it's vulnerable people who maybe don't have social networks, are in underserved areas, are disabled, lack resources, lack a means to meet their basic needs. And when I talk about basic needs, I'm including a basic need for love, affection, fraternity, social support, and are vulnerable to being recruited by a trafficker into and then controlled and into this so-called relationship where they're being exploited. We see a lot of fraud around labor trafficking in particular, where there's our bait and switch tactics around jobs. Jobs are offered. The conditions, you can go online, you can go on Craigslist, earn $1,500 a week stuffing envelopes at home. Really? So sometimes there is debt bondage where people are made to pay to acquire a job, and then they are unable to pay off those upfront fees. and are forced to work under conditions where they either don't receive pay or the conditions are very harsh, may not meet OSHA requirements, and they are unable to extract themselves from that kind of situation. We see that in North Carolina in farm labor situations, in door-to-door sales, in begging and panhandling crews, which again may exploit some of the vulnerable people that you all serve. Coercion is by far the most common means of control. We've all been coerced. If you've had a 2-year-old, you've probably been coerced into buying something that you didn't want in the checkout line just to stop them crying and their temper tantrum. Coercion basically means emotional manipulation or deception or threats. So we do see a lot of threats in human trafficking. These threats may be threats of physical harm, threats of a loss of love or affection, threats where a person can be threatened with losing their residence or their source of income. We see a lot of threats to reputational harm. So I'm going to tell everyone that you blah, 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 blah. And it's the same way that many abusers in domestic or interpersonal violence situations control their victim. So force, fraud, and coercion. Next. Traffickers, as I said, target vulnerabilities and exploit power differentials. So the trafficker has power and they exert that power through means of control over the other person for their own purposes. And their purpose has to be something of gain or profit. Profit doesn't have to be money. It can be anything of value. So you can see here on this slide, we know who's vulnerable. We don't always pay attention to them. And so sometimes human trafficking is considered a crime that happens, quote, in plain sight, or there's a national movement and it's called beneath the surface, because we've probably all seen it and didn't necessarily recognize it. We don't always attend, again, to our most vulnerable fellow citizens and residents, and it just skips by. Next, Gabby. So this is a person, Polaris, you'll hear about this later. The Polaris Project, if you're interested in learning more about human trafficking, the polarisproject.org is a national nonprofit that was formed to create and sustain the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We're going to give you that number as well. And so what we ask folks to do is if they suspect human trafficking, again, this exploitation of another person for commercial sex or forced labor, that they call the Polaris Hotline. I call it the Polaris Hotline. It's actually the National Human Trafficking Hotline, but everybody refers to it as Polaris. And they report. The intake folks on the phone answer 24/7 in Spanish and in English and use language lines of up to 200 other languages to respond. And they respond to, we know that this is an evolving awareness and concern in the United States. And so people have lots of questions and folks can call, there's no quote, dumb question on the Polaris hotline. You can call with an inquiry, you can call to ask for more information, you can call with a suspicion or a report. So it's not quite as formal an intake process as it might be, for instance, if you called Child Protective Services or Adult Protective Services. And they do use a focused interview to gather information. And then if they believe that there's a verified report of human trafficking, what the national hotline does is links with law enforcement and service providers on the ground to report and investigate the case. So for instance, in North Carolina, we have law enforcement teams and service providers throughout the state, the 100 counties that are trained and are listed as partners with the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Hotline gets a call from Lumberton. They route it back to Robeson County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department communicates with social services and they take the investigation from there. So this Polaris, because they take all the calls nationally, also gathers data and information. One thing about human trafficking is the data, they're not great. It's a work in progress. We don't have wonderful, reliable, verified data around incidence and prevalence anywhere in the United States. We think we know that this is a growing and really, unfortunately, thriving crime, especially in the era of COVID. And so what they do, however, in order to document and report back out to states is track the phone calls and then issue reports around vulnerable communities and around different forms of trafficking. And so they issued a report. I think you can see down the link with individuals with difficulties, maybe increased risk of human trafficking. And this is a quote from a survivor who did call into the hotline, and then they took part in a focus group afterwards. Again, I don't think anything that the survivor says is going to be surprising to anyone on this call. People with disabilities are inherently vulnerable to their access may be limited, their agency may be limited, they may have physical needs that can only be met through engaging with another human being. And so they are vulnerable to the exploitation by those other people. Next.
Nancy, there was a question about if we could provide the phone number for the Polaris, the national hotline, if you could include that in the chat or if it's in the
we
slides.
we have it on one or two slides, but I'll tell it to you right now if you would like to write it down. It's fairly easy to remember, and the cadence is a little different. To make it easier, it's 888-3737-888. 888-3737-888.
Thank you.
And you can text. During COVID, they're getting more and more contacts through text, and the text is #BeFree. So I talked about legislation. You can see that the human trafficking was only recognized as a federal crime in the United States in 2000 through the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, or what's known as the TVPA. Obviously, we had chattel slavery in the United States, and some people do refer to human trafficking as modern day slavery. That's a whole nother presentation. I do not, because human trafficking is not race-based, it's not intergenerational, it's not state sanctioned. In fact, it's outlawed by the state. There are a number of reasons why it's distinct. And so we use the term human trafficking. But the TVPA has been renewed several times, and it was initiated, however, really by, inspired, if you will, by one of the first cases of labor trafficking that was recognized in the United States, which was in 1997. Well, throughout the 90s, but it was brought forth in 1997 that traffickers, including some deaf Mexican nationals, so some of the traffickers were deaf and all of the victims were deaf. They were brought to the United States to beg and sell trinkets on the New York City subway. Interestingly enough, they were also brought to Sanford, North Carolina. So over 20 people were indicted for trafficking the Mexican nationals. They were not allowed to keep the money that they made on the subway. So they were forced, they were compelled to sell, and they were doing it for the profit of someone else. They weren't able to keep their earnings. Some of them were beaten, some of them were threatened. They were all threatened with deportation. They were living in squalor. They didn't have access to other resources. They didn't always have access to food and adequate nutrition, because most of them signed, and they signed like a Mexican sign language, which is a little different from my understanding. Mexican sign language, like the way you emphasize a word, is to sign more vigorously, and if it's less emotional or less emphasis, it's to sign more closely. So there were real access and communication barriers, which were manipulated by the traffickers. This case, when it broke, helped inspire the TVPA, the first federal legislation around human trafficking. And it created new tools to hold traffickers accountable and included folks with disabilities. And Congress, for the first time, included forced labor in that definition of human trafficking. So again, we can see how our understanding is evolving. Lots of people conflate human trafficking with sex trafficking, especially the sex trafficking of minors. And they go further, like I said already, with the like abduction and selling of little girls in Ukraine. Sometimes it's much more subtle, and you may perhaps see it on an off ramp of 440 when you see someone in the median begging and panhandling, and we pass those people by and say, oh, get a job, or they're an alcoholic, or we tend to judge, right? But we don't really know what's behind that scenario. And it may be that they're doing it of their own volition, or it may be, such as in this case of the beggars and panhandlers in New York City, that they were compelled. Next slide. Henry's Turkey Farm is an infamous case that some of you may have heard about. I would refer you to the New York Times documentary on it. There's a video, it's about a half an hour long, I think, and there are numbers of articles about this. I know that Gabby's going to talk a little bit more about it because it certainly involved benefits trafficking as well as human trafficking. And this was a case where, I said for 20 years, but it's really over 20 years, men with intellectual disabilities were brought from Texas to Iowa to work in a turkey processing plant, and they, quote, earned 41 cents an hour. They had been receiving care or living in group homes in Texas, and then were sent to this work site. They lived in squalor, faced physical and verbal abuse, harsh discipline. And even though they worked for decades, some of them, they were only able to take home at most $65 a month because they were docked for room and board and for entertainment, clothing, other options. It was a notorious case. The organization that sent these men to Iowa supposedly, reportedly, moved about 1,500 people from Texas to other work sites around the country. But it was these men who eventually were, if you will, discovered, and their situation was remedied. They won one of the biggest, I think Gabby's going to talk about it, one of the largest economic or financial decisions in the country around labor abuse. They haven't received it all, but they did win their case in court. Next slide. And the Fair Labor Standards Act exemption is also part of this ongoing discussion around labor trafficking, where we know that employers can pay workers with disabilities less than the minimum wage if it's determined that the person cannot perform the job as well as a person who's not disabled. And so there's some room there for exploitation and even forced labor. So I do want to reiterate again that human trafficking and benefits trafficking are related. Case law is still being developed. Federal laws, state laws are constantly changing. Even though the first federal law, TVPA, was passed in 2000, we're still learning a lot about what human trafficking is. We do know that it occurs within the disabled and senior populations, vulnerable populations. We also know, so I just want to put this out there, that workers at especially unregulated, unregistered, unlicensed homes, settings are also vulnerable, in particular to labor exploitation, but also to sex exploitation and trafficking. There have been cases of Filipino workers in California that are doing personal care, ADL sorts of things, and have been exploited by an employer under these human trafficking laws. So it's interesting because the human trafficking world has kind of gone that way and thought about the workers who are being exploited and has much less evidence or awareness around the vulnerable care partners who may be being exploited. And that's why I'm so grateful today to be part of this conversation, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues now.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
Oh, and I think that was some phone
Yep.
numbers.
Here's the last one. Here's the human trafficking hotline number. Again, they're replete with information. You could take an afternoon and read their reports on different industries in which trafficking takes place, different kinds of vulnerabilities, and what various states are doing about it. Thank you.
So I just wanted to touch quickly on Henry's Turkey Farm, as Nancy was talking about that a few minutes ago. Henry's Turkey Farm was really the catalyst for the creation of the program that I work for, which is the Representative Payee Program. It's protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security. One of the other facts of that case was that all of the individuals who were working at Henry's Turkey Farm all received Social Security benefits. And as Nancy said, these individuals were only taking $65 home a month. All of their Social Security benefits were also going to the players at Henry's Turkey Farm. So for 20 years, Social Security funds just went unchecked. There was really very little oversight by Social Security in these large organizational representative payees. I should backpedal and say that a representative payee is when an individual is charged or tasked with managing the Social Security funds of a Social Security beneficiary. So for 20 years, folks were, all of their Social Security funds were going to these Henry Turkey Farm players, and it was not being managed, so or regulated rather. So in 2018, the president signed the Strengthening Protections for Social Security's Act, and that gave the PNAs across the country this program where we now can monitor, conduct different educational visits, and conduct reviews of these representative payees. I'm going to talk about North Carolina today, but we are doing this work with sister organizations across the country. So there's a lot of representative payees out there, and our program is really only touching the tip of the iceberg here. So there's 5.7 million payees across the country managing $70 billion with a B dollars in annual benefits. That's about 8 million different Social Security beneficiaries across the country. And I was thinking about what Nancy said before about vulnerable individuals. And when I think about people with disabilities, in particular, folks on Social Security benefits, those folks receive just about under $800 per month in benefit. And so how enticing is it for someone, who is living in poverty, if someone comes along and says, hey, I can help you with this job and I'm going to pay you $1,000 a week. I mean, that's more than the person is making in an entire month. And so it's leaving some of our beneficiaries in incredibly vulnerable situations. So during the first 3 years of our program, our team in North Carolina has conducted over 1,300 interviews across the state. Those numbers are higher now. I think we've started grant year 4 as of August, so I don't have those numbers yet, but we've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews across the state of North Carolina, interviewing beneficiaries in their homes, in the places where they work. Sometimes they are a part of a sheltered workshop as well. That's a distinct part of this representative payee work. Social Security has prioritized for us any representative payee that is also acting as an employer, based on that Henry's Turkey Farm case that it's not always a bad thing, but Social Security has sort of marked it as a red flag if that is occurring. We have found significant financial issues across the state. That's 940 different deficiencies. We've made 270 referrals on various things. And in all of our cases, we've had, and again, this is probably an August number, but to that date, it would have been 11 instances where we had to alert Social Security and other authorities that there was something pretty serious going on. So this is just a little bit more about the type of reviews that we're doing. So there are different types of representative payees. There are individuals, that's your example where there might be a parent serving as a representative payee for their child. We had one situation where there was a woman whose family was I think they had passed, they were no longer involved in her life. And so a family friend started acting as the representative payee, and it led to some issues with benefits trafficking and coercion and potentially labor trafficking as well, as she was sent to go work in a grocery store. And then the representative payee was, helping her quote unquote manage that money by putting it in his account and then dispersing it for her, even though that was not under his authority as the representative payee. There's also organizations, so you might see a nursing home or a group home that is acting as a representative payee for the people that they serve. There are fee-for-service organizations. They are exactly what they sound like. They take a small fee, $44 or so, to manage funds. That has to be a Social Security authorized fee. There are government agencies such as DSS agencies, and this is Social Security language, state mental institutions, but really any state operated facility like our state operated nursing homes or developmental centers. And then there's different initiations. So periodically by statute, we have to conduct reviews at certain types of representative payees every 3 years. Those are considered periodic. Predictive model cases are very interesting. These cases are selected by Social Security in a random algorithm where they have determined some high risk factors for representative payees. And then based on those risk factors, they send my organization out to conduct the review. And I think the team would probably agree that we do find more issues in those predictive reviews because a lot of those payees have never been reviewed before. Like Henry's Turkey Farm, they've been payees for 20 years, 30 years. They've never had anybody look at their books. And so there's not a lot of management. Whereas with a periodic case where there is a payee that is being reviewed every 3 years, they pretty much understand the rules and regulations. The other piece that I'd like for you all to pay attention to in particular is the P&A initiated cases. And so my contact information is in here. If any of this is ringing any bells for you as you're listening to this, please give us a call because we do have a direct line to Social Security where we can request to do a review of a representative payee if we are hearing word of benefits trafficking or even more minor issues or issues where you think that the payee, not to say that this is minor, but if there's physical abuse or it doesn't have to be just financially related or trafficking related. There can be other just general concerns that someone has with the representative payee that will allow us to do an investigation. For the purposes of time, I'm going to skip the next 2 bits under initiation. I'll probably skim through this as well, but just so you all know, this is a pretty detailed investigation. We look at a year's worth of financial records for a sample of beneficiaries. And so if you are calling about, sorry, someone's not on mute. Thank you. I lost my train of thought, happens every time. If you request, us to look at Jane Doe's records, we don't want to call out Jane Doe and, because she could be intimidated, or, coerced or something else by her representative payee. And so typically we look at a sample of folks. So if it's a payee that serves 10 people, we'll pull records for 3 to 5 individuals. We do tours of the home. A lot of the common denominators in these benefits trafficking situations, or, at bare minimum, very, very poor care and neglect situations. Mattresses on the floor is common. Padlocks on a refrigerator. Keeping people from having access to even small sums of money, and other things that I guess we see within the home, bed bugs, vermin, those sorts of situations raise a lot of flags for our team that there is something else going on outside of just financial mismanagement by the payee or just a need for education with the payee. We do a lot of education and just helping people understand what their role is, a representative payee, but there is really an intersection, like I said, in at least those 11 instances or so where we believe that there was also benefits trafficking. And then I'm going to leave you all with just an idea of what some of our recent casework entailed. So we have, this is going to be, I think, a theme throughout the morning. We have run into lots of instances where there are unlicensed homes. When there's a licensed facility, there are different regulators that go into those facilities. There are ombudsmen, Disability Rights North Carolina. There's so many people that are in and out of those homes. With an unlicensed home, it just looks like any home in your neighborhood. It's really difficult to see what's going on inside. There was the picture a few slides back of what Henry's Turkey Farm looked like. The bunkhouse looked like from the outside, and you might not have noticed it if you were driving by. And so when our team goes inside to conduct an investigation, we're seeing what's behind the walls. And again, this was a situation where there's a mattress on the floor, there's no blankets on the beds, there's holes on the wall, holes in the walls. And, there are little or no supports in the home. I was thinking again about what Nancy said before about this bait and switch. And we have seen where these representative payees give out flyers to the beneficiaries that say, do you want to live in the community? Do you want to have a great life? We'll provide you with 24-hour care and support and, take care of you. And then when the person gets to the home, they're paying an exorbitant amount of rent. And there is no 24-hour care. The beneficiaries themselves are responsible for cleaning and cooking and, getting themselves to the store, or, some of these facilities, we've even seen locks on the door. So folks were not able to just exit and enter, freely as they wanted. In addition to all of this, there was significant financial mismanagement, no keeping receipts or retaining records, and where this really, I think the lines get very gray, where Nancy and I start to have calls offline is, hey, additionally, this payee did not report to Social Security where the beneficiary was living. And so they continued to collect the person's Social Security disability benefit and do who knows what with it, for a period of time. And that's really where this work starts to slide into outside of, slide from financial exploitation and potentially mismanagement to benefits trafficking. So I guess why I'm here today is to tell you that the lines are gray and it isn't always clear, and it's not always clear to us. And so we are here as a resource. This is my contact information. Feel free to email me, call me. if you believe that someone is misusing funds or if there's Social Security benefits trafficking going on. So I think that was my 10 minutes. I'm going to pass it to you, Heather. Thank you all so much.
All right, thanks, Gabby. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so we talked about human trafficking earlier. So benefits trafficking is actually a criminal code that we have in Georgia. So it's in the official code of Georgia. It's very similar. When we started to initially create this law, we thought about opening up the human trafficking statute. And of course, if anybody is familiar with how the meat factory works as far as making laws, we decided not to do that because we didn't want to anything else to be changed in our human trafficking statute. So we created a new one under our elder abuse statutes. And so with this, it's the act, the means, and the purpose. The same thing. The act is to recruit people who are elderly or severely disabled out of hospitals, shelters, churches, jails, a lot of times online, or even in licensed facilities. The means is promises of benefits and services that are never going to be delivered. So false representation, also, deception and coercion, brainwashing. We had one guy say that he was being released from jail, from a county jail, and because he didn't have a place to go, the deputy that was releasing him said, "Hey, I'll call somebody that I know has a house." She came and talked to him, convinced him to move in. She's like, "Hey, we'll go eat pizza, and we'll go bowling." And of course, when he got to the unlicensed personal care home, it was anything but fun. The purpose is for their benefits that are attached to them. So whether it's food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits, Medicaid, whatever their resources are is what they want to try to take from them. All right, let's go to the next one. Gabby, can you move forward? There we go. Okay, so we have been teaching the subject for multiple years. We've done presentations all over the United States, whether it be for local agencies, but also the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We know that there are at least 30 states where people have come up to us afterwards to say, "We didn't know what it was, but this is going on in our state as well." Here's a couple of them. We can probably add North Carolina to this after we're done today. So we know that it's going across the country. I have a couple of career goals left in my 6 or 7 years that I have. One of them is hopefully to make this a federal law because we know it's going on across the country. All right, move forward. All right, so our actual Georgia benefits trafficking law states, which went into effect July 1st of 2018, through deception, coercion, exploitation, or isolation, knowingly recruit, harbor, transports, provides, or obtains by any means a disabled adult, elder person, or resident for the purpose of appropriating the resources of such disabled adult for one owned or another person's benefit. And it is a felony. It's up to 20 years and a $100,000 fine. So this is, and I don't know that this is going to play. I had a hard time. Oh, it is. Okay. This is a case that we had in metropolitan Atlanta where the news did a fantastic story. So I know we're running over a little bit, but if it'll play, Gabby, go ahead and play.
The volume is not playing.
Yeah.
I think it has something to do with the way it's trying to access through the platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have some pictures of the house in the presentation a little bit further along, so I can talk about it then. But this particular house was in Cobb County, Georgia, which is in metropolitan Atlanta. And there was one elderly lady that came to the hospital, and she said, she's like, I don't want to go back there. What I was promised is not occurring. And they actually were able to do an investigation, and they were all kept down in a basement. Gabby, if you'll go forward, please. All right, so here's a case study in Athens, Georgia. And this is where the University of Georgia is. It's very much a college town. The professors and the other people that live in Athens usually have decent homes. So if you'll go forward, we'll talk a little bit about the case. With this particular house, it was like a county commissioner lived on the other side of the fence, and so it was an upper middle class neighborhood. There were men that were held in the basement. They aged or ranged in age from 52 to 71. So not all of them were elderly, but Georgia laws include disabled adults and any resident in a long-term care facility. So they were held against their will, charged $300 to $400 a month, and required to sign over their Social Security and EBT. EBT for us is food stamps. So this house was known as the slave house. This is just what the neighborhood people called it, because they knew something was just not right. So they would always call the police. Local law enforcement would go to the door, knock on it. The owner operator would be like, oh yeah, no, there's nobody like that living here. Would never give them access to the house, through consent. So law enforcement would, go forward and, not be able to see or walk through the house. And so this one particular day, the officer saw that there was an extensive call history there. So he knocked on the door, nobody answered. So he decided to walk around. So they had an 8-foot privacy fence around the house. And he just started yelling through the fence to see if anybody would answer. Well, come to find out, there were 3 men that came out of the basement and started talking to him. And he was able to get their names and dates of birth. So he called the local health center where they would have gotten behavioral health services. And they were like, oh yeah, we know those guys, but we haven't seen them in like 3 years. Well, because they had been locked in the basement. So go forward. And there we have some pictures of the house. So this is the house. It looks like any standard house, nice brick, front porch with a little rocking chair. Go forward. So here is the fence. And if you'll click it one more time, Gabby, I wonder, okay, so this is what we jokingly say law enforcement would call clue. So if I want to lock someone in, I guess I would place the lock on the outside, but I'm sure if you have a fence, you usually have it locked on the inside to keep, the bad guys out. So we saw this and was like, okay, so who were they trying to keep in? Go ahead. So this is the door. So the officer was obviously on the other side of the fence. This basement door is right below the bedroom or the bathroom window for the lady that owned the house. There was no staircase that went from the main living area to the basement. So you actually had to walk out the back door and around the yard to get to them. And when they were complaining of a headache or any other ailment, she literally would lower a bucket out of her bathroom window down to them to give them whatever it was that they needed. Go forward. Here they have some greens, but really nothing else in the pantry. She really loved lottery tickets. She was hoping she was going to hit it big. She actually had a regular day job. So she would go to work and used their money, the residents' money, to actually purchase the big dollar lottery scratch-off tickets, hoping to make it big. So these are drugs, and she had other residents that had come and gone. And you can see in the back, the bathroom window where she lowered everything down. she would literally rifle through whatever was there and decide what she was going to give them for a headache or for whatever pain management she wanted to. And it wasn't necessarily their own medication. It was just whatever she had available to her. So this is what it looked like in the basement. They had a bathroom bucket, or a bucket, like a Home Depot bucket or a paint bucket to use as the bathroom. Of course, Gabby said earlier, mattresses on the floor, which is pretty standard. Some plywood, walls for some privacy. So this is one of the buckets that they used for the bathroom. So the owner operator, this is where the human trafficking aspect came into play, because this case is several years old. They didn't really go after the human trafficking aspect of it, but the owner operator drove one of the residents to Atlanta to have sex. The owner operator was paid in drugs for pimping out this particular resident. She also filmed sex acts of the male residents. So she would say, in order to get whatever it was they wanted, you guys need to have sex with each other. She would film that, so they would do it against their will. And then she would tell them, you have to act right. You have to do what I say, or I'm going to share this with everybody, including your family members. So there was threats and coercion as far as the sex acts that she filmed. So this is Emma Heard. So 19 charges in all: exploitation and intimidation, neglect, false imprisonment, unlicensed personal care home. So she was sentenced to 40 years with 20 to serve. To be an unlicensed personal care home in Georgia, you have to have 2 or more residents not related by blood or marriage and provide services for them. So dispensing medication, which she obviously did. We saw all the meds that she had in her bedroom. Cooking, cleaning, reminding them to take baths, anything, the activities of daily living. If you help them with any of those and also dispense medication, then you're running a personal care home that should be licensed. An unlicensed personal care home, a charge is a misdemeanor. But if there's abuse, neglect, or exploitation occurring at the time that it's cited, then it is a felony. All right, go forward. Right, so here's a case study in DeKalb County. So this is also metropolitan Atlanta. See if this one will play with volume. Doesn't sound like it. So this particular video.
Yeah, sorry, I can hear the volume on my end, but I don't know how to get the audience to hear it.
Oh, that's okay. You can find this one on the International Association of Chiefs of Police website. It's actually a roll call video that IACP did. There were several of us from Georgia that were on the committee to choose the cases to do the roll calls, because we know law enforcement, and when they're doing their roll call in the morning or in the afternoon, before they start their shift, they might have a few minutes to just kind of talk about something, talk about what's going on. And this particular case was actually prosecuted in DeKalb, and it's just a great story. So there were 2 residents. They lived in this little basement. The owner operator locked them in with some nails, and they were able to get the nails loose. But you see that there is, again, a bathroom bucket, a table, the little tin under the, bucket underneath the table was filled up once a week, and that's how they wash their hands in their face. The resident that we showed in the video is actually an actor, but if you'll take a look at that lamp, go forward. So take a look at that lamp and then go to the next slide for me, Gabby. So one of the guys was so afraid that he was going to die down there because they were being so neglected. He pulled out 1 hair out of his head per day and hid it under this lamp. So when the DeKalb County police officer, you know, saw him dragging his blanket down the road and gave this crazy story, which he knew sounded crazy himself, and he even said that, he knew that he needed some evidence to show that he was telling the truth. And so if he did die, they wanted to make sure that they had some DNA to prove that he truly was there. And so the defendant pled, and the assistant district attorney who was prosecuting the case said that that was the best DNA evidence she'd ever had in any of her cases. All right, let's go forward. All right, so Chandra Faust is the owner operator. She pled guilty. Bobby Ray Hill was the guy that we saw. He was kept down there for 5 months. And for breakfast, they had ramen noodles and bologna. She was sentenced to serve 10 years in prison and pay $3,000 in restitution. Within weeks, she had gone to the bank and actually put her name on Mr. Hill's bank account so she could access the funds that were coming in for him. So to work these cases, it definitely cannot be done by one agency alone. So here is a scene photo where we're relocating several people that were kept in rundown apartments in South Georgia. We had our healthcare facility regulation, which is part of our Department of Community Health. They are the agency that actually oversees the licensing. They have a unit of surveyors who can go out and substantiate that something is actually an unlicensed personal care home. Of course, Adult Protective Services, the police, sheriff, EMS, our long-term care ombudsmen are great help, especially afterwards, to make sure that the residents do get the services that they need. We have Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And so these are the individuals that will make sure that those that have mental illness or other disabilities get the services and get to see the doctors that they also need to see. We have our Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, which I'm pretty sure every state has. And so they can actually look to see if they're being taken to the doctor. Maybe there is a pharmacist or a doctor who is also involved in the fraud that's occurring. Our Division of Aging Services, Forensic Special Initiatives Unit, they're actually part of the task force that we have with GBI. Our Attorney General's office, of course, GBI, our Prosecuting Attorneys Council, district attorneys, fire marshal, and city marshal, because a lot of times they can shut the houses down because disabled adults have autonomy and self-determination. A lot of times they can say, I don't want to go, I want to stay. But the fire marshal or the city marshal can condemn a location and tell them, you cannot stay, you have to go. And so a lot of times then we're not the bad guys. Adult Protective Services doesn't necessarily have to be the bad guy to tell them that yes, you have to come with us. But if it's, if the place is condemned, then they can't stay. All right, so indicators of benefits trafficking. A lot of times it's just going to be the Social Security cards and stuff. Let's go forward. All right, so the how these cases unfold. Normally it's not, somebody calling and saying I'm being trafficked. Local law enforcement is going to see a high number of 911 calls. It won't necessarily just be, domestic violence issues, but it could also be medical calls. A lot of times the residents or the neighbors of the houses or the apartment complexes are going to, be complaining about people begging for food, unusual noise complaints. Sometimes it is a courtesy check, a missing person. So it's not always law enforcement who discovers these unlicensed personal care homes. All right, so some common themes. Each resident is paying a high amount per month for a half a bedroom. Sometimes they don't even get that. The refrigerators are padlocked. A lot of times they're only fed one time a day. They don't have access to their own money. They might be taken to the ATM to get out the $800 that they have to pay a month. or if they only get $750, then, they probably have to pay, $750. A lot of the residents do have behavioral health conditions that are untreated. So we've got some pictures coming up of some unmedicated schizophrenics who go into crisis, and then how they're neglected. A lot of these, I guess it's more of a spider web thing for us. We see one licensed home or someone that used to work in a licensed facility, who then have several unlicensed homes or begin a group of unlicensed homes, because they know most licensed personal care homes would prefer the residents that make $1,500, or sometimes they charge $2,000 or $3,000. So if you've got someone who's never been able to work, who has a severe mental illness and only gets $750, in Social Security benefits, there's really not a housing option for them. And so they get sucked up into these unlicensed personal care homes, and they don't know the resources that they have available or how to help themselves. And a lot of times they burnt bridges with their family. There was one in that we helped with in one of our larger counties in metropolitan Atlanta. And I literally called his mom, and he was 19-year-old, schizophrenic with anger issues. And she said to me, I don't care where he goes, but he's not coming home. And so that's what we find. And so that's how they fall into these unlicensed personal care homes, because it's either this or homelessness. All right, so here is one particular house where obviously they had some bed bug issues. This is behind, so nobody would see this as they're driving past this particular like building, but you can just see that they just thrown everything back there, and there's really not a whole lot left inside. So this is another residence in South Georgia where there were several men that were kept. Of course, we have multidisciplinary teams, and there's one in Augusta, Georgia, that says that if there are 3 or more rocking chairs on a front porch in their particular area, then they kind of knew that was an unlicensed personal care home, just because every house that they hit had 3 or more chairs. This one has 2. Plus a little rocker on the side. But it just goes to show that a lot of times the residents will just, stay the day outside instead of being inside. This is the house in Gwinnett County where the 19-year-old lived, and the mom said, I don't care, where he goes, but he's not coming home. Let's go forward. This is the house that the news story was showing, and this is much nicer than my own house. But as local law enforcement was knocking on the front door, they had the little ladies, the elderly ladies, who were all very frail. They were literally carrying them out the basement door and putting them in this van, and taking them to a parking lot to try to get them relocated and try to avoid the police. Let's go forward. This is what it looked like in the basement where they were kept. Plywood walls. They slept on chairs. They slept on beds. There was a bathroom that had a mirror that was covered up. Go forward. I'm not sure if there's more pictures of it. No. So this is another location, which was really just a crawl space where they housed some individuals as well. There's no real toilets. They were lucky to have this instead of, the Home Depot type bucket. But this is what we find when we're out there working these cases. So this is false imprisonment locks, and to me, it's intimidation. So again, they're locking them in, and they're threatening them that if you get caught going out the bottom doors, you'll be fined $100. Well, these individuals don't have $100 to their name because they're being exploited. And so this is just another threat of intimidation done by the owner operator. So we tell law enforcement to check the entire property. If it is something that has several trailers on it, or if there's a camper, to make sure that you actually check. There was one that GBI worked in South Georgia where there were 2 trailers. One had men, the other one had women, and there was a deceased resident found in a car. And he had been there for a while. So we do say check the entire property. Just another picture of the horrific conditions that they're kept in. So this is what we see a lot. We see that the refrigerators are either padlocked or chained shut. The pantries have deadbolts on them so they cannot get to the food. A lot of times they have doors that lead to the kitchen and it has a deadbolt on it as well. Sometimes the keeper of the key might be the most functioning resident. And for that, sometimes they have a less amount of rent to pay because they are the ones that get the snacks out or, cook the meals for everybody, which again could potentially be labor trafficking. Go forward. Oh, go to the next one as well. Click it again. So this is Joey. Joey is was an unmedicated schizophrenic. With this particular, and I know we're running over, so I'll talk quick with this one. Joey was kept in an attic. Just like North Carolina, Georgia gets really hot in the summer. And so he was kept in the attic. One of the residents actually broke out and was found walking down the street. Local law enforcement was called. They said, or the resident said, I don't know the address, but I can show you where it came from. There's 2 other guys that live there. So they found one in the back of the house and he was just laying on the bed watching TV. But they were like, well, I thought you said that there were 2 others. And they're like, oh yeah, the other guy's in the attic. So local law enforcement went up, opened up the attic and saw Joey lying there just like this. Now he looks like he's older, but I don't even think he's in his 60s yet. But if you'll go to the next picture, go ahead and click it again. Okay. So this is Joey, and he was obviously taken to the emergency room where he was then released after, I think he stayed like 2 or 3 weeks in the hospital. Started to put on some weight, was sent to a licensed personal care home. And this is 18 months later, and they're getting ready for court. So this is one of our success stories to where we can see him before and after. Go ahead. So some of the key concepts, if you just want to click, Gabby, with all of those. So the residents, just like regular human trafficking victims, they're going to be brainwashed and groomed. So it's hard to build the trust. They might not necessarily trust law enforcement. They've always been taken advantage of. So it might be harder for them to want to listen and to want to get the help. You may be viewed as the bad guy, and they might not want to talk to you. The residents want to protect the owner operator because that's the person who's been taking care of them in their eyes. All right, so assessing the financial exploitation. Go forward for me, Gabby. So this is a lot of times the food stamp card for us. You can see that there is a code, a PIN, and the date that that the money is put onto the card. And we can show through a forensic audit, financial audit, that a lot of times the owner operators collect all these cards. They put the PIN numbers on the back and the date so they can go to the store on the 10th to get groceries, and we can see where they're swiping all of the cards to pay for the food. We've actually had one case where the owner operator funded their wedding anniversary party with lobster and steak and everything else, and had a fantastic gathering. while the residents paid for it, but only got bologna and Wonder Bread. So these are just multiple cards. This is a lot of times we find in the owner operator's wallet or purse. And this is important for us. So some financial questions to ask if you'll click through all of these. You definitely want to know were the benefits used for them, or was it used for the owner operator? Does the resident know who controls their Social Security income? A lot of times they change the payees without even the beneficiary knowing that that's been changed. A lot of times they'll change the bank accounts to go into the owner operator's account instead of their own. So the resident aware of their own income or other sources? Are there financial documents in the house? Is the resident charged for food, but also asked for to give up their EBT card? So they might say, hey, the rent's $700, you got to pay $50 for food. So $750 a month of your $750 that you get. And then you also have to give us your EBT card, which would probably have another $200 or $300 on it. When you've got, say, 8, 9, 10 houses and you have, 6 or 7 residents, we've seen owner operators bringing in $40,000 a month just in financial exploitation of these types of benefits. Let's go forward. All right, so following the money, go forward. Let's just, so definitely look at the drugs as well. So the prescriptions, who controls it, who's administering it, how often they're going to the doctor, the types of prescriptions, are they billing for services not rendered? We have a case right now where we had a sex trafficking victim that was getting mental health treatment because of her drug abuse. The housing options as far as victims of human trafficking, a lot of those nonprofits wouldn't take her because she hadn't been drug-free long enough for their program. And so she ended up in an unlicensed personal care home. And according to what she was telling us, they actually would drive them to the doctor where they would sit and watch TV instead of getting the counseling that they needed, but they're billing Medicaid for mental health treatment. So that's still an open and active case. All right, let's go forward, Gabby. All right, so the owner operators, obviously, they are living the life, they travel and have nice cars. So working together, you'll click. I didn't realize there were so many clicks here. You definitely need to know what authority you have. A lot of times people don't want to talk to each other. So we tell everybody, stay in your lane, but let's make new friends, know your state and local contacts, respect the victims by building a strong case, stay connected with law enforcement and social services, and keep your eyes open, most definitely. All right, so here is our contact information. And I know we went over a little bit, but I know that we'd be willing to take any questions as well.
Please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. I know that we had a lot of comments made, and the financial crimes aspect of it, Heather spoke to, and from the human trafficking perspective, we are increasingly working very closely with financial institutions and organizations that are working to investigate and prosecute money laundering in particular, and the movement of money in the human trafficking world. We're seeing more and more cryptocurrency that's being used, as well as more traditional ATMs and such, but financial institutions, insurance agencies, other organizations have to report suspicious activities at SARS. They make reports, and there's financial crimes that have to be, if suspected, reported to monitoring agencies. So we as Heather said, are increasingly realizing when the human trafficking world, we used to think, and there's still talk like this, that the TVPA talks about the 3 Ps, prevention, I'm going to space out and forget the second one. Prevention, well, prosecution is one. We thought we could arrest our way out of it, get the bad guys, and this would be over. And it's just not that simple. And we have to work across organizations, agencies, and sectors of society. And to that end, financial institutions play a really important role because there's always some kind of profit involved, as do housing inspectors, the Department of Health and Human Services, different regulatory agencies, Department of Labor, at both the federal and state levels. So we're trying to demonstrate that today when the 3 of us came together to give this presentation. And we invite you to, again, look up all of our resources and continue the conversation either now in the chat box. Gabby and I think, are both monitoring it. And then also offline if you'd like to follow up with our contact info.
Okay, Nancy, I wanted to answer Oliver's question. He says, what is the ongoing strategy for working to uncover these types of homes and advocate for people with disabilities in unlicensed homes? So we created multidisciplinary teams in Georgia where the judicial circuits, so the DA's offices, can create them. And we are successfully showing the success of these. We are also working with our agency, Department of Community Health, Healthcare Facility Regulation, to create a program for law enforcement to actually be able to go in and do surveys when they have cases, criminal cases that are open. So either through consent, search warrants, exigent circumstances, can access the homes and go in and do the surveys. Because a lot of times healthcare facility regulation is so understaffed, it's going to take them maybe 10 days to get out there. And law enforcement, when they're there and they're on scene, they can't wait 10 days. They need to do it then. So we are teaching our first class coming up in December to the GBI. We have an at-risk adult specialist in each one of our 15 regional offices. So we're going to do our first class when we do our next in-service. But we work with APS. I mean, they call me all the time, not only with the human trafficking, but the benefits trafficking and abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So it's more, I mean, I feel like I do the job of about 4 people, but I'm passionate about it. And so, we'll train anybody that needs a quick little class on how to work these.
I think that there was another question here about when dealing with unlicensed home, because there's such a lack of regulation or oversight, is it challenging for professionals like adult protective services, social workers, ombudsmen, et cetera, to get in the home? And how do you find a way to get in to conduct an investigation? And that's where I would say, everyone, please call me because if there is Social Security money involved and a representative payee managing that money, or you believe that there is, that's a way that we have in. There was a comment, I think it was a direct message to me very early on in the presentation about, if we've already reported this to other agencies, adult protective services, if they already know about this, should we call you anyway? And I would say, yes, please call me and let me know, because I'm sure as many of you have similar situations, we don't always communicate between agencies. And I might not be aware unless, someone has gone up the channels to Social Security and Social Security assigns a review. Whereas if you tell me, I know exactly what it is that's going on, and then, we can start from there versus, playing that game of telephone. So please call us, at Disability Rights North Carolina. Call me. And, I think that, I don't know, Heather, I don't think that we have Nancy, you might could speak to this. I don't think we have a program like Heather's here in North Carolina, or at least it's pretty underfunded. But I'm not sure about a special unit that does this work here. I could be wrong.
I don't believe we do.
I know we're the only state law enforcement agency that has like a program, a task force that looks specifically at elder abuse and abuse against disabled adults.
I wanted to respond to the question that was asked about, is there a breakdown of age, gender, race for perpetrators? Asking because both of the cases that Heather discussed involved African-American females, and the person said, I'm sure it's more widespread than that. Well, as you know by now, I can only speak to the human trafficking piece, and human traffickers, I'm gonna suppose that it's similar for benefits trafficking, but human traffickers, most exploitation takes place within some sort of relationship, whether that relationship is very loose and casual, like a neighbor, an uncle, an aunt, but it's typically the person is groomed within a relationship. Stranger danger is very much a minor piece of what happens with human trafficking. And so typically the gender, well, sometimes the gender, but the race, the age, the affiliations, memberships of the perpetrator and the victim may be quite similar. And so, however, we know that victims are, again, folks who are already vulnerable, and they're targeted by predators and traffickers for their vulnerability. And some of those vulnerabilities do include age, disability, lack of resources, people of color, people who don't maybe have access to transportation, and who are reliant on others, as well as age in regard to emotional, developmental perspective, stage, position. So very young, who can't give consent, and then older folks who may have just a decreased capacity to exert their own agency. And how about with the benefits trafficking? Is that different there? And I'm putting that out to Gabby and to Heather. Is there a prototype of a perpetrator?
You know, that's not information that we collect. You know, we look at folks, a lot of times there isn't necessarily a clear connection to the representative payee. We definitely have, you know, parents, you know, every once in a while, Social Security assigns us a case where we're looking at, you know, a parent managing their child's funds, and the child is 4 years old, and you know, that's a very different situation. But, you know, a lot of times our beneficiaries didn't have a parent, they didn't have someone in the community that they knew. There's very little support. I think we see that as well in the LGBTQIA demographic, where you have folks that, you know, have you know, they've been disowned by their family, and so they don't have anybody to go to, and so they are assigned this random representative payee. Sometimes it's a person, I think it was a great example that you had, Heather, where there is one licensed facility. That's how the person meets the owner operator or someone else that's a caregiver within that home, and they start to receive treatments there. And then it's, well, we're going to move you to this other place. You know, it's closer to a bus route, or, you know, whatever that might seem appealing, and they move that person, and then that's the unlicensed home. And so in North Carolina, the rate for room and board is $11.82 per month, the Medicaid rate. And so if they're in the licensed home, they're paying $11.82. And there might be 3 or 4 beds in that home per person. That's all inclusive rate. But then they move to this unlicensed home that, you know, isn't reported necessarily to Social Security, and so they continue to charge $11.82, even though their address is now this unlicensed home, and instead of 3 or 4 beds, there's 8 people, there's 10 people, they are all paying that same rate to not only share a room with one person, but 2 or 3 people. So all that to say is I think our team sees all races, all ages, all demographics out in the community. And a lot of times the relationships are pretty random.
I would agree with that. The victims in a lot of these cases don't know the perpetrator. They don't know the owner operator of the facility because they're being sent there through some other means. So there might be a relationship between the counselor who is, releasing the individual and the owner operator. We've seen or suspected that there's kickbacks that are going on to send people to that particular network of housing, locations. And so a lot of times they don't know them. The 2 cases that I showed are just 2 that are that were larger. We see a lot of times it's a whole family unit. So if they are tapped as unlicensed or because they have, or if they have a licensed facility, but it's shut down for some other reason, then they just change the name to their husband or their niece or their son or whatever. And so generally, you're going to have in a network of homes, if there's 6 or 7 of them, you're going to see it being run by family members and good friends.
Thank you all so much for your presentation. It was wonderful. I know everybody enjoyed it. We're going to take a break now until 10 after 11. I do believe that Nancy and Gabby and Heather are going to monitor the chat box in case additional questions come in during the break, and we'll discuss those or go into those after the break. So we'll see you back at 10 after 11. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Were there any questions the presenters would like to respond to that came in during the break?
I don't think so. Not that I've seen. We've been trying to respond in the chat, but I'll check with Nancy and Heather if you've got anything else.
I don't, other than thank everyone for being here. And I'm going to stay on because I want to learn more about APS. And so I, again, thank you for inviting us to participate today. Follow up with us through our emails if you think of anything in the future.
And just so everyone's aware, I know I put it in the chat, but in case you didn't see it, the presentation from today, which was wonderful, by the way, is available on the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse website. So you can go and view that and get any information you may have missed during the presentation from the presentation that's housed on our website. So now we'd like to go into some committee reports. And I'd like to turn it over now to Ann Elmore and Tadra Martin, who are Education Committee co-chairs. Ann, Tadra?
Good morning. Good morning. During the break, I trust everybody has seen the topic and speakers for our January 19th general meeting. Everybody is welcome. We would so appreciate your fellowship and also your membership, but you are welcome to attend either way. We're hoping to advance the all of our skills so that we may better help our communities. And as you can see, our session on January 19th is improving North Carolina's adult protective services, and it is to give a high-level overview of the plan to affect change in adult protective services in North Carolina. So the plan will cover 4 areas: consistency of practice, community stakeholder engagement, community education. We learned a few things today about that community education. It might be happening in a neighborhood like your own, scary thought. And APS statutory improvement. So we welcome you. Tadra?
Tadra, I can't hear you.
She's unmuted, but I don't see. Something wrong with her microphone. Yeah.
Tadra says something's wrong with her microphone. So Ann, anything else you'd like to add?
Well,
for Tadra?
Tadra will be sharing with us next at our general meeting on the 19th, our speaker for March. And so we'll be looking forward to that. And we continue to work toward our annual conference, just to let you all know that that is in the works. Discussions are at present that it's going to be wholly virtual. We tried and we're working with trying to make it a hybrid, but the complication level is huge, especially with speakers, some speakers being hybrid or remote and some being live. So what we're going to look at again is a strictly virtual meeting, and that is scheduled for mid-May. More about that in January. And final thing, as Tadra has put in the chat, please, anyone, everyone, any ideas for speakers or topics to move the ball forward? We're none of us getting any younger, and we need to improve it for all of us. So please share your topics and ideas in chat, or if you wish to connect with Tadra Martin or myself, Ann Elmore, but we welcome you to do it in chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Next up, we have Nancy Warren. Nancy is our advocacy chair. Nancy?
Oops. All right. You caught me. I was doing something else. that education committee report was too short. Uh-oh, I didn't plan it very good. Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's good to see all your names. I don't see hardly any faces, but it's always good to see your names. Glad you're able to be here. We have a little handout for the North Carolina budget. Thank you very much. And I just wanted, this was sent to us, anybody who's part of the North Carolina Coalition on Aging this morning or late last night. And these are some elements of the North Carolina budget that was just signed by the governor that are components that are of concern to folks who are in the field of aging or adult protective services. And you can, I don't know, if we can, if you go to the Coalition on Aging website, this is there. I just copied and pasted their information into a Word document so that we could share it with you all this morning. There may be some things that are of particular interest to you that are on this list. Reimbursement rates for adult daycare, day health, and transportation to be set by local entities. I think that's a pretty big deal and something that people have been working toward for a long time. Recurring funds for home community care block grant, some increased slots for the CAP DA program. Gosh, I was just trying to look here for, there's a lot of it. The increase for the special assistance personal needs allowance. I think that's something people have worked on for like 20 years. And in the SA in-home program has seen some changes to removal of the cap on the number of allowable SA in-home payments and creating parity with the SA program. These are pretty important and significant changes. There was one other thing I wanted to just grab a hold of here. Yeah, but I'm not seeing it right now. But anyway, this information is on the Coalition on Aging website. You may have some other resources for, in the North Carolina budget. Great news. Yep. Thank you. Nothing specifically for adult protective services, I'm sorry to report, but yeah. So, but speaking, thank you very much, Allison. I appreciate you sharing that document. You can, we can go back to people sharing, I guess, if you want to. I want to talk to you just very briefly about all the things that are happening in North Carolina or across the country, really, as it relates to 3 or 4 different items. The first is, we've talked about this before, about all the states and the territories receiving federal dollars from the as a result of COVID. There's COVID dollars that came to states for the specifically for adult protective services. There is money through the American Rescue Plan. It's called abbreviated as ARPA, A-R-P-A, ARPA. ARPA 1 and ARPA 2 federal dollars that are coming to states have come and will be coming to states. The ARPA dollars and the COVID dollars that have been around, the COVID dollars have been around for a while, and the ARPA 1 dollars are already at states going to work. The ARPA 2 dollars will be coming next summer. So over the course of the next 5+ years, APS programs in all 50 states plus the territories will be receiving these federal dollars to improve their adult protective services programs. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. That money has nothing to do with any of the federal legislation that is pending right now. So for instance, we've been sharing a lot of information with regard to the Build Back Better, also known as Budget Reconciliation Act, that has quite a lot of federal dollars for adult protective services, for the long-term care ombudsman, let me see, so other elder justice programs. That's different than the then the infrastructure bill that was just passed. So, you've probably been following that along, but there's no APS provisions in the infrastructure bill. But in the Build Back Better Act, there is a significant amount of money to states for elder justice and adult protective services. That's what the advocates at the federal level and what we all should be paying attention to right now. Also, kind of coming alongside of the Build Back Better Act and the provisions for protective services and elder justice initiatives, there's the reauthorization and modernization of the Elder Justice Act too. So, but what I understand is that the Build Back Better Act is the focus of advocates at the federal level, and they'll continue to contact us as individuals and as organizations to advocate, is their focus right now. And they're hoping there will be a vote in the House this week, and then the Senate won't pick it up probably until after Thanksgiving. I personally contacted our state senator, our senators Burr and Tillis, and asked them to support the provisions in the Build Back Better Act for adult protective services. And of course, they responded to me. I'm very, and I was glad for that, and telling me that they won't be supporting the Build Back Better Act at all. So, that is not really a big surprise. So anyway, there's a lot going on. And for the first time, first time ever, there's a significant amount of money that are coming to states from the federal government for the direct services of adult protective services. So now is the time for states and territories to really take advantage of this money that's coming to them and make some significant improvements to our state's adult protective services program. And I think that is, I'm gonna just look at my notes, make sure I didn't leave anything out. Nope, that's all I have. Yep.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yep.
All right, next we're going to hear from our Awareness Committee, John Marin and Stephanie Bias. John?
Well, thank you. I think most of what I have to say is relating to, and I mentioned it in passing in the chat about the helpful platform and the prosecutor's handbook. Just reminding people that these resources are out there. I think once more people know about it and start having conversations with their local prosecutors, whatnot, I'm hopeful that some of the horrible stuff that our presenters shared earlier will start to be dealt with. And I just want to let folks know that Anne mostly and I have been doing these training sessions folks with regard to the helpful reporting platform. Just in the last couple of months, we've done I think 3 events, one in Wake, 2 in Alamance, and next week I'm doing one with Clay County. So just want to encourage the conversation along these lines, and if anybody has any questions about it, reach out to me or Ann, and I'll turn it over to Stephanie. She's been traversing the state, I know, wearing out her tennis shoes.
That's right, wearing out my tennis shoes. Praying for the day I can get out of these and into regular shoes. But anyway, hello everyone, and thanks, John, for your update. I too have always mentioned in the speaking engagements that I have done, and we're in the middle of open enrollment for Medicare Part D and Medicare Advantage plans and things of that nature. Anywhere I'm talking about, I always mention the partnership. And especially last week, I was at the North Carolina Association for Home and Hospice Care Association conference, or leadership conference last week in Wrightsville Beach, and did have an opportunity to talk with some of my fellow vendors, as well as the folks that came to the desk about what we do with the partnership. And they are so pleased because, you know, they're the ones that are out there in the homes, and sometimes I think they see things that, you know, probably are disturbing to them, and they know they know their obligations, but you know, they are still thankful and aware that we are there and advocating as hard as we can to make sure that those laws are stringent, and that, you know, from some way that we always make sure that people are aware of what is acceptable behavior and what is not, if we want to put that anywhere nicer. But thanks, guys. You know, we still look forward to having more and more presentations in person, which we can use that. I know John was at the state fair last in October, and I'm sure had an assortment of folks that came by. And I always think it's important for us to make sure that folks know that we not only do what we do for our particular agencies that we work for, but we're, you know, part of a coalition, and we always give an update. John and I gave the update at the North Carolina Senior Consumer Fraud Task Force, of which we're the co-chairs, at the last meeting in October, about things that are going on. So we're very thankful to have co-members of the task force as well as members of the partnership. But thank you for everything everybody is doing. And great presentation today on human trafficking. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Sickening presentation, but great presentation.
Yeah. Next, we've got an update from our communications committee. Allison Crossman, Adam Cox, and Laura Slavak.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to remind everyone that you can find updates from today's meeting on our website. And for all of our members, if you have paid your membership dues this year and you are hosting an event, or you know about something that's going on, feel free to share that with either myself or Allison so that we can also help you spread the word. We can put a link to it on our website, as well as our Facebook page. So also today's recording will be posted in the next couple of days as well. Allison, do you have anything to add?
Just a quick reminder too, to visit our Facebook page. All you have to do is like the page, and then you'll see the latest updates there. Our Facebook page also includes the meeting reminders. So if you happen to lose your link or just need an extra calendar reminder, our Facebook page is connected to those email updates as well. So it doesn't hurt to be subscribed to both.
Great. Laura, anything to add?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. All right. That takes us to the membership committee. Kevin Robertson, who is the chair of that committee, had to leave the meeting early. So he did ask me to pass along a reminder to everyone that the membership application is on our website, and it is time to, you know, pay dues and join up. And we'd love to see all of you that were members come back as members, and we welcome all of you as new members. The other thing is we are looking for a member to join our executive team and serve as treasurer for the partnership. Our current treasurer, who is Pam Palmer, Pam has moved out of state, and so we're looking for someone more local to serve as our treasurer. So if you have any interest in that, please let me, I'm Laura Kochman, or any of the other executive board members know of your interest. And we certainly, as an executive committee, would like to speak with you about that. That's all the committee updates that we have for now. I do want to remind everybody that our next meeting is January 19th. At 9:30, and we look forward to hearing about APS in North Carolina. Do any of our members please have any updates for us? I see there's a question. Can you post the job description for the treasurer? I'm not sure. Allison, is that on the website? I don't really think it is. Basically, the job description is to keep track of the money coming in and the money going out, and present the report. The treasurer would also serve on the executive team, which is like the steering committee for the partnership. Let's see. Yeah, Ann put up what is up there. But like I said, we don't have a job description per se. It is a typical treasurer's position. So I hope that helps if anyone has any questions. Do we have any member updates? I don't see anything in the chat right now. No, I don't see any. So with that being said, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will make
So
that
moved.
motion.
Okay, John made the motion, Ann seconded. Thank you all for attending. Thanks to our wonderful speakers. Stay safe.
Take care, everybody. Happy